Energy vampires. Today, in this same sense, we will talk about energetic vampires. Energetic vampires also feed on the energy of others. Their name is not capricious, presumably according to Professor Lugano, of gastric or digestive energy, which the organism metabolizes and eliminates in the sanitary dependencies. Or puruvits, as it was said in ancient Rome. Some scholars hold a contrary theory, which states that energetic vampires are a completely unnecessary fuck. In other words, energetic vampires eat what others excrete. Of course, we refer to a kind of metaphorical, poetic excrement, to the cachinea mentioned by Catulo. Perhaps this is why energetic vampires are associated with beetles and other insects that do not hesitate to frequent organic waste. Now, how to protect yourself from an energetic vampire? Very simple, through a series of healthy habits that we must observe religiously. First, we must avoid the release of methane in tight sites, such as the subway, the bank, or the court of Tristan Suarez. Secondly, we must learn not to abruptly break the sentimental bond with our intestinal waste. It is inadvisable to press the button of the reserved as soon as we make our deposit. On the contrary, it is prudent to stay there for a few minutes and ensure the safety of our waste. Of course, energetic vampires are very cunning beings, and do not exclusively feed on solids. They are also capable of metabolizing our gaseous expulsions, and of aspirating true trumpets without major reservations. The insightful reader can recognize them because they are always the first to accuse, in the most arbitrary way, the rest of the parishioners of emitting surreptitious oils. We invite the reflective reader to elucubrate on this exciting topic in his next deposition. Energy vampires, characteristics, symptoms, and how to protect yourself. To recognize an energetic vampire, also called psychic vampires or emotional vampires, it is first necessary to know what their characteristics are, then the symptoms that can be experienced in their presence, and, just then, understand in what way we can protect ourselves from the harmful influence that they emanate. There is not a single key to recognize an energetic vampire, but many, almost as many characteristics usually manifest this type of individuals. Next we will review the most important ones. In summary, energetic vampires exert a strong influence on the people around them, in a way, infecting them with feelings of physical fatigue and psychic and emotional discomfort. Some researchers say that it is only necessary to share the physical space for a very short time with an energetic vampire to feel totally exhausted, both emotionally and physically. These types of attacks, to call them in some way, are not always so obvious, since the energetic vampire is characterized by being a very skilled person, one who constantly seeks support from others, but always in an obsessive, sickly, and even parasitic way. This means, in short, that an energetic vampire will do anything to not be alone, which would lead him to face himself and his fears. Only in the presence of certain people, whom you supposedly appreciate, do you feel energized. This does not mean that the energetic vampire is constantly the center of attention. In fact, they are astute enough to go unnoticed in certain circumstances. Let's review now, point by point, the personality and characteristics of the energetic vampire, as well as some symptoms that can be experienced by being close to them and in what way it is possible to protect themselves. 1. Energy vampire equals victim. Energetic vampires specialize in the art of victimization. They are unable to take responsibility for what happens to them, and even more, they tend to think that everyone is against them, that everyone, in some way, participates in a conspiracy to harm them. This type of belief, of course, allows the energetic vampire to evade responsibility and, at the same time, generate compassion and even pity on others. This is one of the main characteristics of the energetic vampire, basically the emotional blackmail, that is, the use of any occasion to show that the rest of the world is against him and, in that way, manipulate the people around him. In short, the energetic vampire starts from the false premise that he is a victim. 2. Irresponsibility. Now, if the energetic vampire does not feel responsible for what happens around him, both to himself and to those who participate in his inner circle, it is logical to deduce that this lack of responsibility leads him to believe that he should not feel guilty about nothing. This is the second characteristic of the energetic vampire, the total absence of guilt. As a general rule, he will be very good at articulating quite elaborate, and completely false, arguments to justify his reactions, but above all to make others feel that they are responsible for everything that happens, and does not hesitate to point out the others in this sense. 3. Narcissism I dramatism. With energetic vampires everything is reduced to a question of narcissism, but at the same time it dispenses with true self-love. In other words, the energetic vampire does not hesitate to become the apex of the universe, even when this leads him to assume a ridiculous posture, lack of common sense, begging and imploring when his tricks fail, or directly pathetic. In this context, the energetic vampire is dramatic in all aspects of everyday life. Everything dramatizes, exaggerates everything, thus turning a matter of minor importance, even irrelevant, into a true personal catastrophe, of course, the product of dark forces that try to harm it. His last resort, when all the others fail, is to break into tears or burst, literally, in response to his inability to deal with frustration. 4. Jealousy. It would be unfair to say that energetic vampires are jealous of their partners, since they are essentially jealous of anyone who has the misfortune to integrate their inner circle. The reasons for this jealousy are usually illusory, totally imaginary, or at most based on such insignificant matters that no one in their right mind would notice them. However, the reaction of a jealous energetic vampire is completely disproportionate in relation to the fact that originated it. In a certain way, the energetic vampire supposes that when the interest of his partner, or of any other person whom he considers as someone close to him, is diverted towards someone else, even in a simple conversation, his influence on her is in danger, and consequently it reacts as if the very bond that unites them is at risk. 5. Symptoms of punishment. Being unable to handle the rejection, and the logical frustration that brings with it, the energetic vampire is like a dog that simply cannot let go of a bone. He insists, until exhaustion, by minor situations and discussions whose victory does not provide him with greater satisfaction. The energetic vampire usually insists to exhaustion, it is true, but not always implacably. For example, he may give in on some issues, but he will generally end up punishing the other for that victory, often with a spiteful, offended attitude, which can often lead his rival to believe that he has treated him unfairly after all. Saying no to an energetic vampire is tantamount to an insult. And the answer to that imaginary insult is, of course, to be offended. This type of punishment to those who have rejected it is usually psychological, from being offended to generating a climate of work and or family coexistence that is truly tense. Now, when the target of this type of punishment begins to show that its effectiveness has lost strength, the energy vampire radically changes its strategy. From feeling offended, it starts to show a conciliatory behavior, as if nothing had happened before. This is one of the main characteristics of the energetic vampire, knowing how to adapt his strategy according to the emotional states of his victims. It is important to understand that energetic vampires know perfectly well the weak points of the people around them, and do not hesitate to induce all kinds of feelings related to remorse and guilt. 6. Insecurity and manipulation. The energetic vampire is not only insecure, despite being tenacious and determined in certain circumstances, but also knows how to use that insecurity perfectly to drag others to the vibration of their own emotional state. Any insecure person tries, as far as possible, to avoid those situations that distress him. Instead, the energetic vampire generates them himself. This allows him to victimize himself, instill his own fears about others, and, ultimately, manipulate them. 7. Paranoid arguments. Another characteristic of the energetic vampire, regarding that reality in which all his links are in danger, is to believe that at any moment he can lose everything. Seen through reason, this does not necessarily seem to be a bad thing, however, The energetic vampire fears only losing what he considers his own, that is, his property, partner, friends, work, etc. This induces the energetic vampire to live in a very unhappy reality, full of fears, but also in a plane that allows him, among other things, to make dire predictions about the future, announcing at every step misfortunes that rarely occur. Being afraid of losing everything, the energetic vampire never risks anything. 8. Influence on others. About his own life, we already know, the energetic vampire is never guilty of anything, but the opposite happens when it comes to the lives of others. He feels entitled to get involved in everything, and he exercises it in an active way, trying to make decisions for others. Your partner will rarely be able to do anything without taking your opinions into account. In fact, if someone does something without consulting it, this is usually taken as a direct offense, which, of course, must be punished. Critical comments, inappropriate, aggressive, even, are common currency in it. His level of criticism of others, and above all of expectation, is frankly intolerable. Nobody, ever, does things as well as he does. 9. With energetic vampires everything has to do with themselves, and anything, however absurd it may seem, that contradicts their interests, is taken as a direct attack, or as a proof of that global conspiracy of which we spoke earlier. Now, since everyone around orbits, the energetic vampire is at the center of everything. This means that you will put your particular interests and concerns ahead of the elementary needs of others. 10. Dissatisfaction. Finally, the characteristic of the energetic vampire par excellence is, of course, dissatisfaction. Even if he gets what he wants, it's probably not enough for him. The few things that actually satisfy him quickly are discarded after being obtained, thus transforming into another reason for dissatisfaction. The funny thing is that, seen from outside his inner circle, the energetic vampire can be seen as a very active subject, since all the time he runs behind goals that, according to him, will give him a deep and genuine joy. Up close, however, it is observed that those same objectives, when they are met, do not produce the slightest satisfaction. This degree of dissatisfaction responds to a very simple question: the energetic vampire does not really care, nothing gives him pleasure, in such a way that his response is to increase again and again his level of demand on others, on his work, on life itself, as if it were, and all, in a certain way, were in debt to him. Energy Vampires, Protection and Recognition Guide. How to defend yourself from energetic vampires. To calculate the possibility that there is a constant exchange of energy with everything that surrounds us is something that has been happening for thousands of years. With different names, properties, attributes, this energy is what the researchers of vampirism associate with the so-called energetic vampires, also known as psychic vampires or emotional vampires. Of course, energetic vampires do not look anything like the vampires of literature. The energetic vampire does not literally feed on our energy, that is, does not physically metabolize anything that can be measured by science. It is, in any case, a metaphorical diet, although with quite objective foundations. In the case of the victim of an energetic vampire, at the beginning, a mental deterioration occurs, a nuisance that weakens the emotional and physical defenses of the subject. Our body responds to both physical and mental stimuli, that is, to our mental and emotional states. The energetic vampire, consciously or not, acts first on our mind and then, already weakened, takes advantage of any weak point in our personality. Those who defend the position of energy exchange argue that energy vampires are not only those people who absorb the vital energy of others, something that, on the other hand, we all do more or less frequently, for example, from places where they govern positive stimuli, but, in addition to absorbing it, they offer nothing of their own personal energy. By the way, energetic vampirism does not only come from other individuals, but also from places and groups of people. We have all experienced sudden sensations of exhaustion in certain places, in the company of certain people, without which nothing can explain it logically. Many people, for example, also possess a great flow of vital energy, which translates into an unbreakable mood and great facility to become group axes. These individuals usually end up exhausted at the end of the day, not only by the waste of vital energy they offer throughout the day, but also by the attacks of energetic vampires that gravitate around them. The correct energy balance of the self can only be measured by oneself. Only one is able to identify their risk areas and what is the status of their immune energy system. Learning to know these risks, these areas and situations that consume our psychic and emotional energy is a very healthy habit that can save us more than a headache, literally. Speaking of energies is a simplification of complex frameworks and psychic balances. It is not convenient to think of us as small power plants that release energy, or that accumulate it, as energetic vampires, but as beings governed by the mind, which at all times tends to balance but is often unbalanced by the environment, the attitudes of others, or because of the subject itself. From always the people more prone to be victims of an energetic vampire are those that, exactly, work with the emotions, both their own and those of others. If we add to this a sensitive, empathic personality, capable of thinking of himself in the other and for the other, things can become even more dangerous. Another occupation of risk is the study or practice of occultism, esotericism, and witchcraft. Paradoxically, people who operate in favor of good, that is, those who cultivate spirituality, also tend to fall into the clutches of energetic vampires. People who have been systematically attacked by energetic vampires not only affect their psychic balance but also their health and personal relationships. The emotions that better and more quickly trigger the absorption of energy are jealousy, hatred, fear. Combined they can be catastrophic. While the most logical recommendation is to get away from energetic vampires, this is not always possible. In fact, energetic vampires are not always unpleasant subjects. It can even happen that one of them is a very close person, who shares with us the home or the workplace. Energetic vampires can be kept at bay by mental exercises, visualizations, meditation, etc. However, the real risk is the vampiric atmospheres. One can learn to ignore an energetic vampire, and even immunize and collaborate to restore the values of balance and psychic balance, but the places, the sites saturated with emotions and negative impulses are notably more resistant. These places, which not only make up the archetype of the Gothic story, such as cemeteries, abandoned houses, hospitals, etc., can be presented in the form of an aseptic office or a seemingly warm home. However, the atmosphere is present. It is perceived as a stubborn, clumsy, blind presence that presses the subject to balance it with its own imbalance. Many choose the path of cleanings, but personally I think it is simple acts, small gestures, and a firm and patient posture that manage to eradicate the harmful atmosphere of certain places. Outside of your comfort zone, anyone faces the possibility of being the victim of an energetic vampire. However, that meeting does not decide its outcome, nor does the attack make us victims. The most habitual attitude after having confronted us with an energetic vampire, or with a vampiric atmosphere, is what really decides our later emotions. A passive posture generates the ideal broth so that our mental energy is not renewed correctly. In that case we should do the opposite, return to our comfort zone and take advantage of all the tools and habits that help us recover the psychic balance. Peace, joy, happiness, the harmony of certain places are also infectious. The simple act of fighting against adversity, of dealing with unpleasant or markedly unfortunate situations, is a way to recover the balance. Passivity, on the other hand, is exactly what every energetic vampire expects from his victims, that meekness that turns into apathy, boredom, reluctance, turning us into easier targets to oppress. Now, there are some concrete methods to protect yourself from energetic vampires. The energetic vampire always generates a negative emotion that can easily rush us from our center of balance. Never, under any circumstances, should we give in to the impulse to lower ourselves to their state and fight with them from there. Mark limits the magic word that destroys energetic vampires is no. Do not react. Energetic vampires feed on reactions. They want them and try to generate them, by the way, very effectively. Fortunately, their efforts are not really tenacious. If one remains firm and neutral, they will end up looking for another more propitious victim. Often the energetic vampire is fiercely competitive. Feeding that trend is dangerous. Relativizing your anger, your frustrations, your fits of anger, is very effective. Energetic vampires do not react well to mockery, but hate irony and sarcasm, they just cannot handle them. Beyond these tips, sometimes a song, a memory, the echo of a fragrance, of a voice, of steps that we will no longer hear but that come to us every time we feel alone, are defenses that no vampire energetic can break down without being sprayed against them. In the words of the huge Dylan Thomas, do not be docile on that good night, be angry against the death of light. Search your own perspective. We await your comments and suggestions. Until the next post, have a nice day.